I will switch on my video first, and after that we can all start switching on.
Okay. Okay.
Good morning, teachers. Give us about 5 minutes. We should be starting the webinar in 5 minutes.
ನಿಂದು ಚಾರ್ಜರ್ ಇದು ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಇಂಟರ್ನೆಟ್ ಯಾರು ನಿಮ್ಮ
I request all teachers to please keep themselves on mute, just to ensure all of us have a smooth experience with the webinar. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First of all, let me start by wishing all of you a happy Gandhi Jayanti. And I think it's a wonderful day for us to have another webinar with our speaker here today. We will get to introducing her soon. But before that, I'm aware that it's a holiday for all of you, and I'm thankful and grateful to all of you for joining, taking time out even on a holiday and joining us on this webinar. CLLE, which is Center for Learning, Leadership and Excellence, and TeacherTribe.world. We have been together for a while now, and we are organizing a lot of teacher engagement events and activities and many other things for all you teachers to take part in. Most of you would have already taken part in our first webinar, which happened about 15 days ago. We had a very respected and reputed speaker, Bala sir, or most of you might know him as Balaji. He was the previous Director Academics of CBSE. And today we have Mrs. Minakshi Balkrishna. I have someone from CLLE, Dr. Nagamani. She has interacted with you in the previous session as well. She will introduce Mrs. Minakshi to all of you. Dr. Nagamani, can I please invite you to take over and introduce Minakshi ma'am to all of us?
Thank you so much, Rashmi. Good morning, everyone. Let me take you through Minakshi ma'am's profile. Mrs. Minakshi Balakrishnan completed a post-graduation in economics from Stella Maris College from Madras University. She has a bachelor's in education and has 30+ years of teaching, training, and administrative experience. Her experience has largely been in international schools in India and abroad. She has implemented IB primary years program and also conducted evaluation and self-study for the schools. She was completely responsible for the planning, implementation, execution of the program. She has conducted several workshops to initiate the school teachers to orient themselves to international curriculum, methodology, and also pedagogy. She has conducted several workshops in IB schools in Gujarat. She was also the chair of GUJNAT, an important body between IBO office and the local schools. Her last tenure was from an international school as an executive director. Her constant quest for learning has helped schools across India. She has attended several workshops at Harvard School of Education and other platforms to get insight into the future of teaching, learning, and tickled it into her school domain. It seems that she never stops learning. She is a constant learner. As an example, she is still learning Western classical music and plays the Hindustani classical music on the sitar. Her last stint was with the Center of Environment Education as a program director for primary and pre-primary schools. She has implemented a nature-based program for 3 years to 6 years olds. Her passion in education has helped many, a startup to Wonderbox to science-based DIY kit to help concept and programs. She is now an education consultant for several schools and is also an advisory committee and on the board of some schools in Ahmedabad. She is an avid reader, likes books on education and management. Her passion has dwelled into research in these fields. She is pursuing a PhD in education and management from the Academy of Human Resources in Ahmedabad. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Rashmi and Nagamani, for that wonderful introduction. I'm delighted to be part of CLLE and Teacher Tribe. And it's an honor for me to have this platform and talk to all of you. This is a place where you have educational practitioners and you have teachers and professionals who believe in educational pedagogy and taking them to classrooms. And what is it that makes us special? Behind the CLLE and Teacher Tribe, there are pillars. The former director, chairman, G. Balasubramaniam, academics. We've got Giri Balasubramaniam and Vijay Rajagopal, who want to make an impact to society by providing this platform for people like us to share what we have with others. But what comes across to my mind is the vision statement. It talks about we develop thinking teachers who ignite the joy of learning to create a better world. Today, it is Gandhi Jayanti. And just like Rashmi said, a salute to our independence and the father of the nation. But to quote him, I would say, be the change that you want to be. And thereby, I'm talking about what is the kind of change that we are looking for in designing thinking classrooms. So let me just spare a few minutes to talk about Gandhiji and his thinking and what it impacts today's world. Gandhiji talked about self-reliance and satyagraha. He talked about non-violence and ahimsa. He believed that it is these thoughts which will bring a peaceful and a tranquil world in harmony. When we talk about non-violence and the impact it has made on several other great leaders like Dalai Lama, Martin Luther King, and of course, the famous Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela. And then here we talk about changing the world, changing the thought processes. And what echoes even today in the minds of people is the fact that Gandhiji's thoughts still resonate today. Now, when we talk about change, what kind of change are we looking for? He talked about economic changes, producing a little bit so that we can take care of our resources. He talked about simple living and high thinking. Today, be the change that you want to be. And I talked to you about designing thinking classrooms. And so let us change the way we look at our classrooms. So what change can we look at today? What can we take to our classrooms? What is this new phase post pandemic, or rather now the endemic? What are the new phases that we're looking for? What are the new
Minakshi ma'am,
ideas?
if I may please interrupt you for just a moment.
Sure.
I'm really sorry. Dear teachers, you can see a phone number on your screen. You can send your questions through while Minakshi ma'am is still speaking, or once she's done speaking, anytime is fine. You can send your questions to this phone number, WhatsApp it to this number, and depending on how much time we have, we will ensure that we ask your questions. We may club a couple of questions which are similar and ask them together, but we'll ensure that we answer your queries for sure. So please take down this phone number and WhatsApp your questions to this number along with your name, and if you wish to share your school name as well. Also, we have a couple of other details on the certificates, which I will get to you after Minakshi ma'am is done with her talk here today. But for now, for the questions, please note down the number and you can send the questions there. Please, Minakshi ma'am, please take.
Thanks, Rashmi. I think, yes, that was good for you to say that, so that they can be connect later on if they have any questions. That would be wonderful. So let us now just start about what are the various ways in which I could structure the new classroom. So I'm going to share my slides with you now, Rashmi. I think I'll go ahead with sharing my slides.
Sure, ma'am, please.
And just give me a minute to change this into full screen. Right. And that's it. So I was just talking to you about Gandhiji's impact on society. I was talking about the vision statement of what CLLE and teachertribe.world is trying to emphasize on. And then now we move on to what it means to have designing thinking classrooms. Now, when you're talking about thinking classroom, what is it that children are going to think? What are the teachers going to think? It is going to be structured around how best you're going to look at your curriculum in a very different way. There'll be lots of literature written about thinking-based classrooms, design thinking. But today, I discuss with you designing thinking classroom, which can be used across curriculums, across the several boards that we have in our country and the world, and across classrooms. Over here, classrooms I'm used in a generic term. A classroom can even be under a tree or even in a regular classroom. All right. So when we're talking about what are the structural changes that you want to make, what are the tools and strategies that you're going to use? What is the innovation in education that you're going to talk about when you look at designing thinking classrooms? So what works, what doesn't work? What is it that you're going to do about it as a teacher? You might be in any grade. This is a very generic talk today where you can use and implement it across. So what are the habits of good thinking? Habits of good thinking would mean having good dispositions, whether the child is curious, determined, questioning, whether the child is methodological, or whether it's playful or collaborative. These are various dispositions available for us. So what are the habits of good thinking? And habits of good thinking would mean having good dispositions in and towards patterns of intellectual behavior. What can be taught? Can it be taught? Yes, of course it can be taught. We are already using critical thinking in our classrooms, but I would like to share with you what happens in the future. Howard Gardner shared with us the 5 minds of the future, and he said that it is a disciplined mind, a synthesizing mind, a creating mind, and 2 major other aspects, a respectful mind and an ethical mind. And now this is all to link our diversity of the diversity of our classroom, the cultural milieu, the social milieu, the economic milieu, and all of it put together to bring in the cognitive spectrum. So that's in a nutshell, what the future is looking at. How are we going to program ourselves to a new curriculum, or maybe make changes when schools reopen? Some of them have reopened. And now when we are setting aside, looking at the new education policy 2020, this is the time to start, because after a long gap, children are just looking forward to get back to that interactions. So designing classrooms has its own challenges and opportunities. So what would be the 21st century challenges and opportunities? So we're talking about teachers having intellectual competence. We're talking about collaboration and teamwork with innovative ideas. We're wanting teachers to be reflective practitioners. Look at your curriculum and keep evolving. When the technology is moving ahead and things are getting obsolete, what is it that my students will take with them? And that is good thinking. We're looking at the uniqueness of the learner. Teachers are looking at the uniqueness of the learner. What is it that is required for computing skills or ICT skills in the next millennium? So we're looking at collaboration and building collaboration, and thereby trying to make an impact to society. And what is it that we're going to transfer? We're going to transfer the learning environment, which are linked to beliefs. Why beliefs? Because beliefs are aligned with the lens of the conceptual understanding. Knowledge is everywhere, but we want designing thinking classroom to be learner-centered classroom, where there is empowerment of the student, where there is learner autonomy, where you give the freedom to the child to do what they wish in a structured manner. So you're providing them provocations or triggering, or providing them a certain amount of exploratory tables for them to understand the knowledge that they want to, or the knowledge that they seek. But most important is trusting the students and having empathy. High on our list is empathy today. With the pandemic, things have changed so much that we are now looking at the emotional quotient in such a big way compared to what it was earlier. So looking at students with a unique, where they are unique individuals along with empathy. So if you look at what we have today, you're already aware, most of you are aware of inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning, and about project-based learning. John Dewey, way back in 1906, talked about Project Lawn, and he talked about creating multiple ways of giving students long-term projects for them to understand, largely related to economics or the study of employment or study of the statistics that's involved with population or with unemployment or with how the government works. Problem-based learning would be very simple as giving an example of pollution, water pollution, sound pollution, and various air pollution. And then what are the solutions based from that problem? How do children come about? And then, of course, you have inquiry-based learning with all the subjects together and all the subjects that you do in class today. We can talk about understanding beliefs and values, which will link to international mindedness. The Earth's physical geography has an impact on human settlement. We can talk about government systems and how it impacts the lives of citizens. So how you choose your government is going to impact you as a citizen. So as early as you start with citizenship for children, it is a good way to make them understand that one vote makes an impact on the government. So these are all hypotheses which you can use in the classroom by way of making a statement or making a hypothesis in a regular classroom also. Look at space exploration. Today, we're talking about space exploration and new discoveries. How is that going to impact our world today? Just a few days ago, I saw something about Planet 9, and then the gravity and the gravitational pull of the Earth and the planet. Well, we're still working on it. We still can't know, but then we've already gone to space and back, and then there are drives and rides to space where people are sort of queuing up. So what is the impact of space? What is the impact of the solar system? What is the impact of these new planets that are emerging because NASA is able to produce those kind of things. Look at plant diversity and the well-being, right? When you talk about plant diversity and how it can affect the well-being of people and living things, look at animals and how they get endangered because of displacement of their homes. So these are all the various ways in which you can make it a learner-centered engagement in the schools for children to have effective ways of learning. And that is the crux, making it student-centered. So our beliefs and actions. Why are our beliefs and actions very important? Our beliefs and actions are important because what we believe in directly leads to the values and thereby the actions. What we act upon, choose, act, and reflect depends on our belief systems. And our belief systems depends on what kind of knowledge we seek, what knowledge we get, and that links it to the values we believe in and thereby the action. So what? What if we have these actions? So how is it going to be taken further? How are we going to have make changes? How are we going to look at it? But it is the beliefs and action that impact what kind of world we want. What is the way in which we are going to look at the world? What is the conceptual lens that we are looking at when we look at actions that are based on our own belief system? To share with you a small little story of the Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz, the Scarecrow wanted a brain, right? So he wanted a brain. The lion wanted, the coward lion wanted courage, and then the Tin Man wanted a heart. Now this all goes simply where the Scarecrow wanted good sense, the wooden Tin Man wanted kindness, and the lion wanted, from bravery to courage and how he would be. But what's important is the Wizard of Oz gave a degree of philosophy to the Scarecrow. Now, everyone has a philosophy. Everybody has belief systems. Whether you think about it or not, and whether you have a conscious mind about it or not, everyone has a philosophy, even though you're not aware of it. So there is a deeper message which goes with the Scarecrow and the degree of philosophy and how we connect it to what we have. So when we look at our belief systems and patterns, that is what we think of. Now, when we look at our belief systems, it also has a major impact on what is our mindset. Carol Dweck talked about mindsets for children, growth mindset and fixed mindset. But she also said that teachers also could have the same, and how the belief systems are linked to thoughts, thoughts linked to actions, and actions relate to results. Now, these kind of connections between knowledge and the difference between truth and belief rests on your mindset. So whether you talk about a mindset, what is the most productive way of teaching with a mindset linked to thinking? It would be whether you're able to question, whether you're able to examine, create, solve situations where you are in and where you have an opinion or a point of view. And thereby you can talk of how it's going to, again, have an impact on what knowledge and how you get that knowledge. Now, Aldous Huxley said very simply, he said that your knowledge is there already. It is your understanding that will make a difference. How is that understanding going to be different? Because every person's understanding differs. And that is why when we have knowledge across, how do you understand? And that would make a major part in how we look at the ways in which we learn. So it also depends on our skills, our attitude, and how we will look at some of those things. I think there's somebody who is not muted. Can we ask them to mute? And there is some kind of a noise. So maybe have a look at that, Rashmi. All right.
Teachers, I request all of you to please mute your mics. I think it's creating some sort of a disturbance. Yes, ma'am, please go ahead.
Right. So thanks a lot. So then when we come to knowledge, again, understanding of knowledge in a classroom where we want everyone to be thinking, thoughtful teachers make thoughtful children, thoughtful students. How are we going to bring that in? So when you know that knowing is the difference between truth and belief, what is a truth? What is a belief? Many years ago, Nicholas Copernicus told us that the earth revolves around the sun. There is a solar system. With the help of Galileo's telescope, he was able to explore the universe. The belief that time was the earth was flat and that the sun revolved around the earth. But what was the truth? We came to know that the earth is a sphere based on reasoning, based on testing empirical evidences and the sources and making comparison and proving a point at that time. So Copernicus was able to tell the world, when there was an eclipse, he was able to tell the world that it is the earth that revolves around the sun, and there's rotation and revolution. And then, of course, everybody now believes that. But when you're looking at thinking classrooms, designing thinking classrooms, paramount to it is let the questions be the curriculum. Now, why do you want to have questions be the curriculum? Socrates, way back 2,500 years ago, said, it is the questions that make you explore what you want to know. Now, there are different, now today we have come to structured ones like closed questions, open questions, funnel questions, probing questions, rhetorical questions. Socrates had a very simple way. We have to clarify what you want to know, examine what you want to know, identify what are the assumptions that you're making for you to know, and then define your point of view. And there can be many perspectives to that. Now, Socrates said, when you start asking questions, you start volleying about it. Constantly keep asking rhetoric questions, back and forth, then to clear your misconceptions, to discover the half-truths, to discover that some of those beliefs are not true, and then talk about the academic controversies that you can create, and thereby hold those questions important to begin your thinking-based classrooms. And it's so simple, you don't need any resources. The only thing you need is a brain. Now, when research tells us, by way of Piaget, he talks about prior thinking. He talks about thinking skills and content construction. What does he mean by that? Instruction. When he says that, he believes that you start with prior knowledge and then start with the purpose of learning. What is the purpose of learning? Why are you learning what you're learning? What is relevant? What is engaging? What is challenging? Why are you seeking to understand what you are? And thereby, these thinking skills and content instructions become very important because you have to realize that the skills involved start with simple, basic questioning skills. Now, if you look at thinking skills and content instructions, let us look at what would be, to move ahead, what would be the approaches to teaching and learning. Students need to have social skills because in a classroom where there are lots of children, you need to develop the interpersonal skills, very important for the emotional quotient. Research skills, where you're looking at research skills in a very big way. How would they sort of observe? Or how would they collect data? How would they formulate the understanding? How would they come to conclusions? Will they be using media literary skills or even ethical use of medical information? Today, after every slide, if I have taken it from the internet, I say copyright. And that is because of academic honesty. So earlier on, when you're talking about research skill, academic honesty becomes important when you provide reference or when you want to quote somebody. So when I said Socrates, I quoted Socrates, and thereby making it relevant and then also looking at respectful and being ethical. That's very important when you're looking at the future now. Communication skills has become the most important of all today. And why is it so? Because when you want to have a discussion, when you want to talk, when you want to argue, when you want to give your point of view, your perspectives, what are your responsibilities towards how you speak and why you speak? And thereby exchanging information and how you communicate by various ways, whether it is through media, whether it's a written communication or spoken one, what are the various ways of communicating? That is important. and probably looking at the quantitative and the qualitative aspects of communication skills that takes a thinking classroom well ahead of others. Now, to make all this happen, you need self-management skills. Therefore, time management becomes important and make students aware to complete a task within a certain time. Now, when you look at thinking, then how are you going to transfer your knowledge using the following skills that I just spoke about? Your mind, your brain is divided into two parts, obviously. That's what they say, the creative thinking part and the critical thinking part, the creative and the cultural part, and then your logic and your maths logic part, or the critical thinking part, where you analyze and evaluate ideas. So there are 100 billion neurons in the brain, the human brain, and it's like an enchanted loom, waiting and ready to wave a unique tapestry of creative self-expression. Are you providing that self-expression to the students? Are they able to express their feelings in whichever way that they want to, by way of written communication, oral or otherwise? So what kind of thoughts run in your brain? What kind of thoughts do you think of? What are the thoughts that come across right now? Why are you thinking the way you're thinking? What is the basis for that thinking? Now, when you are looking at those 100 billion neurons that are there, there is no manual for that, how the brain works or how the brain thinks. There's a manual for a car, there's a manual for the oven, how it works, but how the brain works and how it functions in terms of the thinking process, we still have a long way to go. So when you look at the approaches of teaching and learning and thinking, and transferring your knowledge into multiple contexts, we're looking at three parts, and that is the anticipation phase, the building phase, and the consolidating phase. So in your anticipation phase, I would probably look at prior knowledge, which becomes important, what they already know. And many a times we do is simple KWL, what I want, what I know, what I want to know, and what I have learned. And now we've added one more, what I know, what I want to learn, how will I learn, what I have learned, and action. So what? We've done all this learning. How is it going to be used? What is the social context in which you are doing all that learning? And then do you have still some more questions which are left unanswered? For a thinking classroom, to make it simple for the students, you can use your graphic organizers, where you have various types of graphic organizers, which is a draft to put on paper, how your thought process works. After using that draft, you can start writing your thoughts, your ideas, which stem from the basic context or the basic big idea or the essential idea. What is it that you're seeking? What knowledge you're seeking? The essential question then becomes important, and then you go on with your inquiry. You also can use mind mapping, where you can plan all the things, your projects and your goals, your strategies, how your ideas come. Everything is on paper. Again, this helps you to look at things on one sheet of paper and the diversity in which you are trying to have those tentacles all over. And your thinking process begins when your mind is mapping. So when your mind is mapping, you're looking at what is being learned, what new questions do you raise, what are the personal connections of this lesson. So if you've learned measurement, how is it going to help you in your daily life? If you're going to learn about the earth and the rotation, the revolution, how is it going to help you today and otherwise? Do you have any questions today? Write them down. So that is what the mind maps helps you to make a personal connect with the lessons. But David Klopp also talked about experiential learning. He also talked about how you have concrete evidence and concrete experiential learning, and that also helps to create good thinking practices in the classroom. But again, very important is creating a culture for thinking. What is the intellectual character for the children to have? How will you create this intellectual character? Peter Lichdudal talked about thinking-based classrooms for mathematics. He said, start with a problem which is your own. So your mathematical problem, you create of your own number stories, to be very, very specific. From those number stories, move on to solving them, putting them on paper, sharing it together, debriefing them, looking at the process. So when you're looking at it, you're looking at the process of learning, sharing that process, correcting, recorrecting, drafting, redrafting, and then the final edit. And when the final edit comes, you make presentations to your classroom, and then you come to your assessment, where you have assessment in groups and assessment individually to actually find out whether you have learned or not. There are facets of understanding. They've got backward design for all of that, and which helps in creating a culture of thinking. But culture of thinking, the onus goes to Ron Richard, who talked about intellectual character. He defined that there are 8 cultural forces that define our classrooms, and talks about opportunities, giving students opportunities. So even in a very traditional classroom, you can provide that one statement, that one big idea, that one big question for them to have a dialogue, providing them enough time and space to model on the thinking process. How do they think? Provide the right culture for the language of thinking. What is this language involved in? What are the kind of questions that you will ask? Provide the right kind of cultural environment so that the students are able to create that dialogue and exchange ideas, work in teams. What are those interactions, and why do those interactions help? Because I'm picking your brains and you're picking mine. And those interactions help us to have a healthy climate and a healthy environment in a thinking classroom. Thinking routines build small little snippets in the classroom to provoke the thinking process. So it can be various ways in which you have tons of thinking routines to start with a big question and then to summarize. And several of those thinking routines help in understanding how to go about your big idea. And then your expectations or your goals or your expectations or your final destination of what you have finally learned. And when you have finally learned, you share your experiences and you set the whole agenda to again experience the process. And you share with the classroom what your experiences are based on the opportunities that you have got. Now, for a culture of thinking and then to create an intellectual character, the teachers are already now all geared, but you need to have a philosophy of learning. So how can you make thinking visible? How do you promote thinking and make it visible in the classroom? Why do we need to have thinking classrooms, and why should it be visible? Because the students need to have routines to make thinking visible by way of engaging them in activities that will promote the philosophy of thinking. Now, what kind of thinking for problem solving? What kind of thinking for project-based? What kind of thinking for inquiry-based learning? And that was what, when you provide students to think for themselves, that itself is an achievement. So there are visible thinking routines which help children to think in a very nice manner. Right now, designing thinking classrooms, you could have a simple one, claim support question, and I make a claim that designing thinking classroom is the order of the day today, and then I make a claim why it is so, and then I support it with question. A very simple routine that I'm going to share with you right now. So Peter Didal also talked about the anticipation phase, the managing the flow of the phase, consolidation phase. Now, what is this anticipation when you introduce the big idea? Then managing the flow would be depending on the approaches or the skills that you have, depending on the challenge that you take. And that would mean, what is the link between skill and challenge? How difficult it is? What are the skills you have? If it is easy, what are the skills you have? And then they will consolidate their process of thinking. They will share with them, they will understand, and then make meaningful notes. Like I talked to you about Aldous Huxley and how understanding is different for different people. And then you make meaningful notes, and then you check the understanding, because different people will have different understanding. Now, for thinking classrooms, how to get started is as simple as thinking critically, having critical thinking in the classroom, have creative thinking in the classroom. So let's look at creative thinking and critical thinking. And then you have problem solving, or you have project-based learning. All of it is to start with how you can improve something, how you can design something, what are the prototypes, how will you take it forward? How will you refine what already exists in the existing system? How can you combine 1 and 2 and make something else? And or how can you invent? So there are several ways, and right from architecture, art. If you look at Leonardo da Vinci's contribution to the world, you can think how creative he was. He was able to imagine, invent a whole lot of things that we still use today. And then he was also able to analyze, break down, compare, and put it together to bring in, to invent something, to improve something. Even today, when the helicopter goes up on your in the sky, you can put the contribution of Da Vinci's initial ones. When you look at gears, you look at Da Vinci. When you look at the paintings of the Renaissance, you look at Da Vinci. So you have the critical and the creative thinking to bring in a refinement of how you're going to learn. Along with this would come, obviously, we cannot let go of Bloom's contribution to how to use verbs and how to use Bloom's questioning techniques. What is this when he started talking about remember, comprehend, apply, analyze, evaluate, and synthesize? But today we have it different from Anderson, who talked about remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and then to create. So at the end of it, if you are able to invent, you are able to create, combining the parts to make a whole, then your learning is sufficient to make an explanation or to provide an explanation of your understanding. And so creating new ideas or making new inferences, and thereby whether we have still some more questions, whether we still need to answer some of them which are unanswered, that would make a big impact to how you learn. Now, when you look at all of thinking classroom, the most important of all is communication. Teachers, whether it is content instruction or conceptual understanding for the children, whether big questions or the big essential questions, the big ideas that you need to discuss, communication of the teacher is to be very clear, concise, concrete, correct, coherent, complete, and courteous. Everywhere, if you see, right from the beginning, I'm using the word empathy, I'm using the word respect, I'm using the word courteous. When we are courteous, others will be courteous to us. So therefore, it is a give and take for us to empathize and then take things forward. But most importantly, when you have good communication skills, you're able to put on paper or even think or speak aloud what you want to understand. Now, the process of a thinking-based classroom would be the theory of constructivism, where you construct your own meaning. The shift in various ways in which your approaches to teaching and learning is directly linked to attitudes and values and interests. Thereby, we're talking about how best we'll be able to construct our own meaning. When we construct our own meaning, automatically we remember it for life. We are all lifelong learners. So then what becomes very important is, what are the characteristics of a thinking classroom? How best can we think of content? What are the questioning strategies that we've got? What is it that we are going to, what is our shared responsibility? What is this, that inquiry and openness? How can we support by way of resources? How can we give support or debrief or give that little nudge to how the children learn? What is the arrangement of a space that we have in the classroom for them to provide that impetus? What is the fine balance between direct instruction and orchestrate what are all the various activities of the students in the class to groups of students, and then striking in the right chord for them to engage in thoughtful conversations. Now, some strategies that can be looked at would be like structured overview or paired thinking or value lines. But then very important was something which Osborne talked about, brainstorming. Before you start any big essential question, let students brainstorm. In fact, way back in 1938, Alex Osborne talked about brainstorming. Later in 1978, he talked about pariah and prashna, which is there in the books and literature where he talks about this, what is outside the purview of your knowledge, what is outside the purview of what you want to understand. And thereby the prashna or the question becomes very important when you want to generate many ideas and about the topic. So questions become the engines of intellect. Dan Rothstein talked about questioning formulation technique. He said generate a lot of questions and then eliminate some of them to come at the core questions that you want to address. But then what is really, really important for me today is to discuss about Paulo Freire, who is a Brazilian educator, who said that the purpose of education is to liberate the human potential. He said that what is important is the compelling idea and the social action. So he says that when we learn all these things, whatever we have to, what is the social action? What is the big idea that is getting transformed into social action? Can we make a change in the way the world views? Can we talk about anything that we want and directly linked to social action? So when we look at what impacts social action, we can look at some of the narrative texts, or whether you have a character map, or whether you have semantic map. These are the various ways in which you can bring about thinking classroom after you start with your questioning techniques. But then very, very important for every school teacher, facilitator is active listening. How best are you going to talk about, how best are you going to listen? Are you going to listen to what your students have to say? So what does it look like? How does it sound like? And what does it feel like? Will you allow them to argue, discuss, converse, communicate, and give them their points of view, give them their perspectives? What are their opinions? What are their ideas? Create that academic controversy in the class for them to have a dialogue, to volley around those questions and take it forward. And thereby, this would then mean how best you can look at the art of asking questions. Way back in Stanley Pine in 1959 talked about the art of asking questions, which relates to it's like a matter of semantics. When you just put words here and there, the question changes. So why it is important to ask questions and a lot of questions, and then go through the process of what you want to really look at. Plato, when he started discussing about his ideas and forms, he discussed how to ask questions when he had a dialogue with Socrates. And then what was important at that time was the connections between the ideas and the ideal to questions that you would ask. So there's a connection between what you want to know and the ideals of Plato. And so if you just want to write 100 questions, what do you want to do in life? You will come to your core question. Towards the 50th question, there will be other questions that you have about yourself and your spiritual understanding, from the material to the spiritual. So body, mind, and soul, and your questions might change because you want to seek answers for yourself, about yourself. Why am I here? Why am I here? So, and what am I doing over here on this planet? So to look at our thinking classrooms, our beliefs will change when the data changes, which means what is our stance for the belief that we believe in? What is the critical, when you're looking at intellectual scrutiny, what is the critical observation that you have based on what claim you're making on the observation? So critical scrutiny is important because you're looking at something, what intellectual ideas that you have, how are you going to look at it and piece it off, and then what claims you're making and how do you support it with those claims. Emotions are different from reason. When you look at emotion and reason, but when you're talking about belief and truth, you need reason to prove the belief and the truth to gain knowledge. To encourage intellectual divergence, why do we need to do that? Because it brings in a diversity and creates a lot of ideas. So you talk about a whole lot of divergence because you want to have that idea present in the classrooms. Now, truth is based on reason rather than opinions and belief. This I have told you before also. And that the span is changing. The way in which truth is based on reason is changing depending upon your beliefs and about the truth and your beliefs system. And that will bring about knowledge. Now, unpredictably and disturbance and disruption is important again because it talks about the dispositions of frames of mind. When you talk about, let's say, multiple intelligence or frames of mind, to dispositions, what kind of dispositions you have, whether you're curious in class, whether you're observant, whether you are open to feedback, that would bring about changes of dynamics in the classroom. When you look at a thinking classroom, it is inquiry driven and not curriculum driven. So what are the big ideas that you want to take forward? And that's very easy for you to do in a curriculum driven classroom as well. The language of reason is used across the way in which the process of thinking based classrooms is used. Students ask questions. I think right from the beginning, I've been stressing a lot about students ask lots of questions, generate lots of questions, and some more questions. And then finally, questions are valued more over answers because there is no wrong answer. So you can go on asking questions to come to your own conclusions. Now questions are revisited, updated, and revised. Over and over again, you want to ask those following questions to make some changes to how you look at life. Any questions? Well, so for that, I would say, to end, I would say children learn to think in thoughtful classrooms where they are enthusiastic and they grapple with important issues and they develop informed choices and opinions where they effectively communicate what they have to. After all, we live on the pale blue dot. It is our responsibility to preserve and to cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. Thank you.
Thank you, Minakshi ma'am. I think you've given us a lot of food for thought with this designing thinking classrooms. You've got us to think, that is for sure. Before we move on to the questions, let me quickly share some details with all you teachers. This number has already been shared with you. I'm still putting it up again. In case you have any questions, please WhatsApp your questions to this number along with your name and the name of your school. For any reason, if you want to get in touch with CLLE on our other programs that we offer for teachers, please get in touch with us on these mail IDs. Both these mail IDs are functional and we will get back in touch with you. For certificates, we have been distributing certificates for the previous webinar as well. And even for this webinar, you will receive your certificates. In any case, you are welcome to get in touch with us for certificates on this particular mail ID. It's Dr. Nagmani's mail ID and she will get back in touch with you. But I would like to request, I'd like to inform all of you that we will take about 15 days to get back to you with the certificates. Only reason being we are a little more meticulous with our certificates. We validate on who have taken part and then send the certificates. So please bear with us if we take a little bit of more time to send the certificates back to you. All right. With all of this, I think, ma'am, we can move to questions. I have quite a few questions here for you. All right, let me just get the question back here. Okay, the first question, how to design the classroom or how to design the online classroom by which students will automatically log in with their videos being on? I think this is a problem that most teachers are struggling or they don't know how to manage this particular issue that they're facing. So can we design a classroom in a manner that the children have to keep their videos on?
Right. So whatever topic or whatever lesson that they are going to learn on that particular day, give them a debrief on what they have to be prepared with. Because in an online class, if there is no engagement directly with the students, then it is like chalk and talk. I just keep talking, you all keep listening. And we all know that only about 5% is retained. When there is an engagement with the student and the teacher, then automatically there will be. Right now, if I were to ask you in your chat box, write down what are all the ways in which you can put videos up? What are all the various videos that you can show your children for that particular topic? You will immediately write a few. Now, if you're not giving that engagement to the student, then they are not interested. You can ask questions and ask them their point of view. Every time you have a particular lesson, you can ask them questions, because there are different types of questions that you can ask for every single paragraph that you're doing. So you don't have to read and make it boring. You can have paired reading, you can have shared reading, you can have brainstorming sessions. But if you, for the same topic that you're discussing, so you're engaging the students. So now, right now, if I were to ask Nagamani, can you share with me your thoughts about Gandhi Jayanti and how you are celebrating in your school? Nagamani will immediately tell me what is happening in her school. Or if I were to ask any teacher right now, Rekha, I can see her here. I can Rekha from Vidya Niketan. I'll say, Rekha, how did you do Vidya? Did you do some activities? Immediately she will, and then automatically, because I am pointing out to Rekha, there will be antennas up. All of them want to know what she's saying and what he's saying. And then based on what they say, I have another point of view. But I need to encourage that talk. That's why I said conversations, argue, have that concise, precise talk going on, have that dialogue between them, keep volleying about them. For that, teachers need to be adept at asking very good questions and let the children answer. There is no wrong answer. Let them answer and ask further questions. So as soon as I stop, I ask some more questions. So that would be one way of engaging. Now, if you want to show a video and keep the video on, why don't you show a video for 2 minutes? There are lots of videos. Show 2 minutes video and tell them what they think about it. What are the salient features of that particular experiment they saw, the animal they saw, plant life, biome, solar system, you name it, you have it. But if you do not engage in them, so your lesson plan, your curriculum has to be based on lots of questions which they can then take part in. Otherwise, how are you going to have this conversation at all? Because I'm going to show them. So it's very typically, and I keep using this example all the time, I'm going to read Agatha Christie and the murder mystery story, the first one. And you know who did it? The murderer was the butler did it. So I've already shared what they want to know. So already the minute I've exposed the murderer's name, they are not interested in this mystery at all. So how do I create mysteries in the class? How do I create magic in class? It can only be by having a dialogue with the children. And when you have a platform like this, make small, short engagements. Have narrative texts. What are your points of view? If you're talking about Tagore, how did it impact Nobel Prize? What were the various poems that were given that kind of recognition? What kind of language reuse? How was it important for each to write about Tagore? So, I mean, you can go on having a conversation based on that, and you're still attending to regular traditional curriculum still. So I think the link between keeping the videos on and not going off to sleep or pretending to be in class is because there is no engagement. If there are smaller children, do kinesthetic, let them be involved with some experiments, let them touch and feel and do. So if you have a lesson, the only thing is you have to take virtual classes, then you need to prepare them with it. So it's a pre-task for the task that you have to conduct. I hope I've answered. I hope they don't sleep now.
No, I don't think so. But the way you have the response that you gave, the solution that you gave, I think that also makes the class interesting for a teacher, not only for the child, because the teacher is also getting to know so many more things that you otherwise don't get to know in a traditional textbook. So I think the teachers also end up learning way more than they would otherwise.
The simplest way, I mean, if you want a structure, just go to Bloom's taxonomy, look at those verbs and start asking questions. Simple as that. Each of those have got, so this is a suggestion. So you do not know how do I ask question, open-ended questions? How do I ask questions? Just follow a structured, pedagogical, method in which you can ask questions. So that is my solution. And all the best. Ask questions. Any questions?
All right. The second one here, ma'am, is that how can we design a classroom that will imbibe values to our students once they come back from the online mode of teaching?
So I think paramount will be empathy, being courteous and empathizing, giving them respect and integrity of if you have intellectual competence. So learn. If you do not know, learn. I grew up in an era where I learned Fortran, which I never used. And then suddenly one fine day, I have a computer in front of me. I had to learn. I had to learn lots of languages, as well as how to put things on the computer and design my lesson plans over there. So you learn. Be a lifelong learner. There is no age to learn. So keep learning, and that will really help you. So your intellectual competency is really important, because the students are expecting more than what they can from by a click of a button. Click of a button, you have got 30,000 sites. If you are going to allow them to have a mobile in front of them while you are taking the class, they're going to click on Google and find out what it's all about. So your lessons have to provoke them to thinking, which is the only trump card that you have. What kind of questions you will ask, he does not know. So that is your picking up that little magic wand, or removing your magic hat and sharing it with the class, right? Use various lateral thinking of the 6 thinking hats to bring that engagement in class. So designing those classroom involves very important factors of how to ask questions, how to design them by giving them that engagement, by providing that stimulus.
Okay. The next question is from me. You did mention saying when it comes to thinking, and we have to encourage them to ask a lot of questions, and we have to ask questions ourselves. I also believe that to ask questions, a person must always have a lot of curiosity. And that's the most important factor to ask questions. With children, when they are very little, kindergarten or even younger than that, or class 1, class 2, they are already very curious and they are asking a lot of questions. How is it that when they grow up, where are we going wrong that we have to reinforce them to ask questions again when they already had it when they were little? Where are we going wrong?
So Neil Postman said, children enter as questions and leave as full stops, right? And this is what you have said. Why is it happening? Because when they have a lot of questions on curiosity, I'll just share with you, my granddaughter asked me, in a rainbow party, where is black? Now that's a physics question, but that was a fantastic question, right? So that she's 3.5 years old. Now, that is what you're saying, Rashmi. When they're small, they ask these questions. What happens when they grow up? Because teachers are not providing that provocation. They're not giving them the triggering factor. They are not giving them the anticipation phase for them to ask those questions. So you're not, when you're going to start a lesson, today I will talk to you about igloos, and Eskimos live in igloos. You've already given it. You've already given it what you're going to do. But if you're going to start with settlements and human houses and how they live, and then move on to how they live in cold places and how do Eskimos live, then you will come to the igloo. But I've already told you that I'm going to teach you igloos. So one is not to reveal what. Let them find out. Let them construct their own meaning. Now, to encourage a lot of questions, I would suggest simply start asking questions to the children. So don't stop. As they grow, your focus is so much on completing the task rather than providing them a stimulus to ask questions. So each of the texts that you have, I've got tons of questions. Where will I use these things? When will I use these things? What is the connection between my real life today and what I'm learning right now? Will there be a connection later on in life? If I want to build a bridge, what are all the mathematical calculations I need to know? I would just like to share with you, Filippo Brunelleschi talked about the dome, and he made a dome without any support, just using geometry and symmetry of geometrical shapes. Now it is 146 feet by 165 feet, that big in terms of the dome, or Duomo as it's called, the cathedral in Florence. Now, he was the first person to start making a dome without any structure to hold in the center. The Sanchi Stupa is in 3rd BC, but it has the chhatra, that is in the center there is support. The Duomo does not have support. How did he take those bricks up? How did he let the oxen take all the bricks up by way of a lever, and then created this Duomo, which still exists and still relevant right now? Architecture and space and the linear perspective is still relevant because of him. He used the mathematical calculation. He knew what is relevant for him to understand what it needs to make a dome. Today, we are not able to answer those questions because we are not asking question, why am I learning what I am learning? How relevant is it? So if it is trigonometry, why am I learning all this calculus? Why? How is it going to help? If I look at a graph, I should be able to say that that is the way I will study economics.
It's funny you should bring up calculus. That was a question I would always ask my parents, saying, why am I learning calculus? I don't understand this at all. A follow-up question to what we just spoke on, ma'am. Yes, the kids, when they are younger, they are very curious. That is one aspect of it. But they're also not familiar with their surroundings. They're just starting to learn about their surroundings. So how do we encourage them, or how do we ensure that they ask questions about their surroundings so that they learn more?
Right. So, Rashmi, I just lost you the last part, but I would suggest for, like, let's say kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, the first slot of children till age 6, to create tables. Provide tables, exploratory tables, science tables, mathematic tables, or subjects or tables for them to look at. Give them the space, give them the place. Yes, let them apply that knowledge that they have seen over there. What are the observations that they have made? Now, when they make observations, they will have questions. If there is a small little cotyledon that is coming out of a seed, how did it come out? How does it know when to come out? Do all seeds come out at the same time? Those will be questions the children will ask. Only if you provide them with these kind of learning engagements. So you're going to teach them about how the seed and the germination, provide them the table, let them observe, let them ask the questions, let them find out for themselves, okay, every seed will grow at its own pace. Let them have that, let them analyze, let them find out for themselves. And that will again bring in so much of curiosity, like you said. How to be curious is because I'm giving them the space and the place. And then you can evaluate them. The same engagement which you do, just showing them on the board or showing it to them, you just provide these spaces and you will see a world of difference, because then teachers who are at that age group can write anecdotal comments about it. I've had a wonderful question over the span of years was, if we put all the seeds together, will the seeds fight under the ground? So you come up with some amazing questions and amazing thought processes. Higher up in classes, I've heard about the caste system and what happens if somebody of a higher caste marries somebody of a lower caste. We allowed that conversation to happen in the class. Only then they will be able to discuss. So you provide those learning engagements for the children to observe, and it is like a little scientific experiment. It's like your learning cycle. You observe, you look at things, you find out what happened, and then you come to your own conclusion. You're constructing your own meaning. Your big idea gets addressed. And then your cycle comes. And then you still have further questions to be answered.
The next question, ma'am, is, does NEP speak of thinking classrooms? And if it does speak of thinking classrooms, how important is it going to be, or what is the importance that NEP has given about the thinking classrooms?
Right. So I think as educators, I talked about first intellectual competencies, collaborative learning, how teachers should get adept and equip themselves to 21st century skills. Today, the generation is talking about AI. We're talking about a technology-driven society. If teachers are not going to even provide thinking, which they have in their hands, then it is going to fall apart. So if you are going to provide lessons which will equip them with 21st century skills, which is what the NEP is talking about, inquiry-driven classrooms, thinking, questioning, becoming paramount, STEM in a big way, art and liberal arts in the sense where in higher education also, they're talking about transdisciplinary in nature, interdisciplinary in nature. How are they going to make this possible? Teachers have the very basis of having dialogues, having conversations about knowledge. So whatever you have to do today, have a backup of what you want to read before you go to a class. I remember teaching in college. For 1 hour lecture, I needed 4 hours of reading to go to a 1 hour lecture. I think the same stands for teachers today in classrooms, in an online class or face-to-face. You need to equip yourselves and not read the textbook. The textbook is a skeleton. The textbook is a skeleton for you to just browse through. Everything else, teaching and facilitating those questions, facilitating the art of having a dialogue is in your hands. And if you make your classroom interesting, there will be interested students. Interested teachers make interesting classrooms. So how do you bring that interest in them? How do you bring that imagination and curiosity? Only if you ask curious questions, only if you ask imaginative questions, only if you ask adventurous questions. There are so many types of questions which you can keep asking them. Equip yourself to intellectual competencies and then take that big leap forward and you will be able to handle them as well.
All right, thank you, ma'am. The next one, learning should be inquiry-driven and not curriculum-driven. That is most ideal, but we are still bound by the curriculum given by the board. How do teachers deal with this? I think while most teachers want to do what you have been encouraging them to do, they are bound by a lot of rules and a lot of limitations, and they don't know how to play around those particular limitations that they have. So if you could throw some light on that.
So very simple. If you're going to do something about plant life and biomes, that is the textbook. That is what is given in the textbook, right? But you can ask a very simple question. Are the natural regions of the world, do they have the same kind of plantation, animals, trade, people, culture, vegetation, temperature, climate? Is it across the world? How is it different? How is it same? Make the comparison, have conversations between what is there in their textbook, but you can ask them what is the connect that they have. Today, when you are looking at your own world, today in Bangalore, what you have, what is the plant life, what is it that's around you, what is the vegetation, to what is happening in some other part of the world. Make the comparisons. If I'm doing animal life, can I remove this camel and put him in the cold desert? What is it that makes the camel where he is and the polar bear where he is? So that is in your hands. But I'm going to do about camel is the ship of the desert, as they always call it. But you can still ask them a question like this. Then automatically they're going to arrive at these conclusions by themselves. If I have to study Gandhi Jayanti's Dandi March, I'm going to ask them to, if you were Gandhiji, how would you have gone through the Dandi March? What would you have done when you had touched the sea, the shores of the sea of Dandi? What would you have done in that march? Automatically, I'm going to come across the whole process of Gandhiji's walk right up till Dandi, the Dandi March. If I'm going to talk about a revolution, what if I lived in that revolution? If I'm going to do Tale of Two Cities, and then I'm going to talk about the French Revolution, and I'm going to talk about literature, and I'm going to talk about history together. But that is in my hands for me to ask those questions. How was this French Revolution important? What is it, the three major aspects of the French Revolution, which we still use today? And why did it fail? Why were people objecting? Why were they revolting? And have we seen things like that, people revolting today? Today, the Gandhiji's Chipko movement. When we look at the Chipko movement today, be it 1970, we still did a satyagraha and said that you will not cut all those trees which were in a tribal area. So what is the relevance of whatever you are learning and teaching to what you are doing right now? So in a syllabus, a curriculum is not about question and answers. They can find it out themselves. But if you ask them based on your text, what kind of questions you will ask, they will answer looking at even the text. But ask them some more questions. How is it relevant today? So if they're going to look at art, what kind of art do you see in the Renaissance movement to what kind of abstract art do you see today? What is Indian art? Is the Varli art different from cave paintings? Why don't you make a comparison? It's in your hands to ask those connections that you make with yourself and the textbook and the world outside. And I would say take it further to local to global. And then bring in that cultural context. Then bring in, if you're going to talk in Karnataka and puppets, I want them to know about Yakshagana. If you come to Ahmedabad on 14th January, you have to learn how to fly a kite. And now if you come in the Navratri, you need to know the Garbhas and you need to dance. So I'm looking at what is it that connects you with yourself. The learning becomes you're important for yourself and enjoyable because you are able to make those connections, because it becomes relevant to you. Otherwise, it is just something that I read and I wrote and then I answered the question and I don't remember. So I always tell, during my orientations, I would say, okay, parents, now it's time for you to write about the Bulgarian Revolution. I'm going to give you precisely 3 minutes. You can talk to your wife if you want to ask about this. And they will all look at me and I will say, there is no Bulgarian Revolution. You have to make thinking visible. How do I make those connects? With thinking routines, with making thinking visible. So if I give a provocation, if I'm going to read about a revolution and then talk about the French Revolution, then it is about having a context to what was the Indian Revolution, what was the French Revolution, what was the American Revolution. So if it's the history, I make those connects. If I'm talking about ancient Egypt, if I was a pharaoh, how would my social structure be? What will I eat? How will my parties look like? That would be my talk about if I was a pharaoh, whom will I call? Or how will I, if I was the queen, how would I put my makeup? Because that's all there in the Egyptian civilization. What kind of bread I would eat, what kind of drinks I would have. So that is there in ancient Egypt, ancient Rome. You can make the connections today. How bread has become evolved today, but it came from Egypt. So what is the connect between today and yesteryears, or now and the future? So I'm in the center. I'm looking at the past and the future because it's the power of now. Right now, I have to think before and after. And what was the things that I will learn, which is my past, that I will take to my future? And Rashmi, I really believe that the only thing that will stay with them is thinking, because it's the brain and their minds which will be thinking in different ways, only if you provide them this. So inquiry-based learning is all about providing them those provocations, smaller ones with tables and experiments. Let them have problem-based engagements for them to work on. So that would be a nice way to bring in inquiry-based learning in the classroom within the existing textbook. So you just have to look at your text and make a hypothesis. So if you're doing something on plant life, you make a hypothesis that the plants that we see or the trees that we see today have an impact on the way we breathe. Simple. I'm going to do this cycle. So the nitrogen cycle, the oxygen cycle, how is the plant related to the oxygen? But we never discussed that. How does a trickle of a water from a mountain come and become a huge river and goes into the sea? Until then it is drinkable, then it is not drinkable. When does it stop? When does it stop being sweet? When does it become salty? What is the density of water? We never discussed this. What is the volume? That is it. What is the density of that water for us to discuss about what it will be like? So every textbook, every lesson can be made into a hypothesis for them to learn. And that will trigger off an inquiry-based learning in the classroom, following your NAP, following your textbooks, completing your lessons. And making it interesting, they will not switch off their videos.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is twofold. The first one is how to deal with children with high IQ along with others without making them feel left out, especially when we are designing classrooms that we're thinking classrooms and in an online medium. The follow-up question to that is, we also need to ensure that we fulfill the socio-emotional needs of students with creative thinking, and that is a challenge. How do we ensure we do that with our teaching?
Right. So there are two parts to it. When you have gifted children or children who have got abilities more than the class benchmark. So the class has got a standard which you have set. Now, different schools have different benchmarks. So obviously, this kid who is in grade 3 already knows grade 5 level, or is in the process right up till grade 5. So how do you make it different? Extension activities where already the concept is taught, and then because in a minute the child is able to finish it, provide extension activities, which means the teacher needs to provide small little learning engagements for that child to be working together. While the rest of the class is also doing the work which is set for them, you can have differentiation in classrooms by content, yes, by concept and ability. So what you're talking about for gifted is by ability. So you differentiate it by ability, thereby providing learning engagements to this gifted child without hampering his concept of the class as well. So he already knows it, you master it, and then he moves on to extension activities. So these extension activities have to be planned by the teacher to provide that engagement so that that child is not bored in the existing class. And then the regular class also follows the ways in which. So a very nice way to do is when you have different ability kits, obviously, like I told you, understanding is different for different children. Then what you can do is to provide different engagements. You can either do it like this, this, or this, providing them 3 options for them to work on. So your lesson plans become important. How you structure your lesson plans for regular students, for differentiated classes, and for gifted children. So whether it is nurture to nurture and nature, how will you do these sessions with them in the classroom is by way of providing them with extra or probably engagements of the same concept, but of a different level. So that will be, he will be in the same class and he will have. The worst is to send them off to some gifted class that will bring out a certain difference between the class and him. And also he will not enjoy being in the classroom and the interactions that they have. So it's nice to have children in the same class. Same is true of slow learners or children with special needs abilities. If they are in the same class, they're at least listening to what's happening in the class. The minute you remove them and put them in a different class, then automatically they have lost out on the existing class and they've not caught up with the backlog that they already have. So these kind of children need special attention, not during the school hours when they are in class, but where is the assessment that takes place to which level they are, and then providing them with those engagements. So whether it's gifted or otherwise, they need to be differentiated by way of ability or content or concept, and then providing them with those engagements.
Okay, one more question, ma'am. How do I make thinking visible with students in classroom? How do we practice that? I think that's the question.
Right. So a very good question, Rashmi. Thinking visible is by Project Zero, Harvard Graduate School of Education, and there are a whole lot of thinking routines. So for core beliefs, to understand core beliefs, what are the thinking routines that you have? So you have sets of routines for each level of understanding, to understand core concepts, then to move further, going further, how will you look at the various examples of thinking routines? So like, let's say claim support question is a thinking routine. I see, I think, I wonder is a thinking routine. I used to think, now I think is a thinking routine. So you're giving them practices. Layering is a practice, is a thinking routine. The compass box is a thinking routine. So there are various ways in which you can look at thinking routines, and it's a wonderful way to set, like you said, how to have a traditional classroom and how to make it inquiry-based, Rashmi. The best way is to include or introduce visible thinking practices in schools. And though there are various ways to go through levels of thinking for various examples, and there are structured ways in which to go about it. So you can use art as well, and it can be used across. The best part is it can be used for all subjects. So whether you have multiple intelligences for every level, you have thinking routines which sets aside the way you think, and then it becomes a habit, and that becomes the culture of thinking. That becomes intellectual character, and then the competencies of the teachers as well as students. It becomes, you facilitate each other's thinking. So visible thinking provides that little, it's that little nudge to start something in class, to provide that. What if there were no trees, for example? What if is a very famous and very popular ones with most teachers. Think, pair, and share, where they would have, when you start a unit, you would use think, pair, and share. So some of these are there. And it's a very nice way of doing lessons in class.
Okay.
And you get different lessons, you get different answers from different children, because there's nothing available to them. They have to think and they have to write. For smaller children, you can give them help words and they'll be able to write. So you have a narrative and then you have the help words. A grade 1 student can write 2 pages with those help words.
All right, wonderful. Before we move on to the conclusion, I think Dr. Nagmani has a question for you. Ma'am, go ahead, please.
Yes, Nagmani.
Ma'am, from Ken Robinson to many other, even to Eric Jensen and many other thought leaders have, been asking this question for quite some time now. The question is, do schools kill creativity? Okay. I personally believe that there are so many natural, talents which children have when they are born, but school gradually, kills those, creative talent, which children have. So what's your opinion about it? Do you really think schools are actually killing creativity and thinking, which is basic need for a creative mind?
Yeah.
So do you also think like that?
I think a lot of schools, if they're using critical thinking, lateral thinking, creative thinking, those schools, inquiry-based learning, they're all schools which will be thinking schools, because you're already providing them the big idea for them to work on. But schools which are using textbooks still, even you are still using textbooks and reading the textbook and marking the answers, are all knowledge-based questions. You're not even providing them ways to create their own answers or to find out for themselves. So what becomes difficult for teachers is the connect between the text and how to make it creative. Creativity is lost because for creativity, you need for children to be curious and imaginative. How will I give them, how will I make them think in a creative manner? I need to have provocations. I need to have that question. What is that big question that I will bring about? A very simple example. What are the creative ways in which you can bring about waste management? You have a garbage bin at home or even in schools. What can you do with it? So much of paper you generate in school because chart paper, this, that, or in the offices. How can you use that paper? What kind of creative ways in which you can use this paper? Can you provide me a solution? And what are the ways in which you will do it? Will it help in a social action? Like I said, Paulo Freire, the educator, talks about making that social connection. Whatever you do, if you do not have that social connection, it is meaningless. To be creative, you need a creative mind. How do you have a creative mind? Is for you to, you need to think about creativity. What is creativity? What are the possible ways in which you can have a particular way of thinking? So very simple. If from home to school, what are the various ways in which you can come? It's a creative question. Simple. But no, you are coming by bus. I know. You've finished it. You've killed it. You come by car. I know. Killed it. But I can hop, skip, and jump. Will be one child who will say it. That is a creative way of coming to school. I might be just living next door. Why have you not thought of that answer? Because you have not thought about it. So I can skip and jump and come to school because I live next door. I can come on my skates because it's next door. My mother will take the skates back. I can come on a bicycle, but we have already assumed. So teachers, when they start assuming for the children, it becomes like playing for Floyd's classrooms. There is no thinking. Everyone is equal. There are machines. So best is for teachers to make them think, let them think of that topic. What is the big question all about? If the government is going to be doing something for citizenship, what is my impact? What does a local self-government do? What does the municipality do? What are the ways in which I can ask the municipality, what is my right? What are my duties? But no, I have already said these are the 6 things which is written in the textbook. So I've not allowed them to think. What are the other things that I can still add on for sustainable development? How can I remove poverty? 2030 Sustainable Development Goals talk about removing poverty. There will be no hunger. There will be water for everyone. Can we reach there? Let's ask our children to think about it. Let's ask our children to think about how to reach there. So creativity is all about looking at anything for that matter, even if it is a text in literature or a poem, how they will look at the poem in a different way, looking at art in a different way. When you're looking at nature with animals, why should animals be in a zoo? Why can't we have natural surroundings? Are we in a cage or they are in a cage? So you have to provoke that thought process. Only then they will have creative answers to it. What are the various ways, other than a cycle, what are the other ways in which you can have a two-tired vehicle to come to school? Can my suitcase change to something else? So I remember we did one session called Creativity, Innovation and Design, where they will come up with anything that they come across. So of course, the most popular was, it was like a computer machine, a small little machine like that. Just like you put your printer, you put the homework and the homework comes out. So you had things like that, where you just sat down and they would put the shoes. So what are all the things that are difficult for you? What will you do? So you just sit down and the shoes clip on automatically. Your bag comes out and they're like gadgets. Make them think like that. Only then you can come out to bigger solutions, better solutions. You know, there's this National Innovation Foundation, which talks about local, very, very simple. It's like the Indian jugaad. How does this happen? Because they're creative in where they are. Now, just by using a cycle, he is actually threshing the corn. So that is possible only if you have allowed them to give that. But igloos, we are going to talk about igloos today, and Eskimos live in igloos. Finished, chapter over. So I don't even know what it feels like to live in igloo. Now, is it cold? I mean, if I touch ice, how will I live in that igloo? Those questions are never answered. What if the stilt? Now, what happens when a house is built on stilts? How deep does it go? What if it shakes? Because here you're talking about structures. What if it shakes? How does the bridge, what is the definition of a bridge? And how does it remain like that? So if you're in Calcutta and you don't understand how the Hooghly Bridge is made, you have not reached it. What are the creative ways of making a bridge? So you have to ask creative questions. You need to get them be imaginative. It's like get the juices out of their brain. It's like getting a whack on that right side of their head to explore it. What kind of chair will you make? So for every lesson that you have, supposing if you were given a telescope, what would you look at if you're doing the solar system? Why should I stick to those planets and their light years and that's it, and the properties? Why should I not look at the telescope and look for myself? Never at rest. Plant life. We do photosynthesis, but what happens to photosynthesis of colored plants? We never do that. Physics. My God, everything falls from the top. It will hurt and break. But what about the raindrop? It doesn't hurt you. So we have not answered that part of physics. Everywhere there are questions. Everywhere there are questions. So stick to that book as a skeleton. Close the book and keep it on the side. Don't look at the textbook. Follow that thread of what you have to in your class. Ask them the ways, what are the creative ways in which you can write? So many ways to do literature. What if you were Shakespeare? What would you write? What kind of sonnets would you write? What kind of poems would you write? Help them with poetry. They can do poetry. So I think, Rajni, where we look at Ken Robinson's very correctly said that we kill it because we tell them what to do. We are not giving them the opportunity of let me do what. Even like, right in the morning, even the dining table, parents will tell you, drink your milk and then have your dosa or idli, whatever. Why can't the child choose? It's going down the throat anyway. But the choice is never given. That's what I mean by learner autonomy, giving them the freedom. That freedom liberates education. The freedom liberates the child to be creative and think creatively. But you're not, you're already killing it because you're already giving the answer. It's like the butler did it. Murder is done.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Simple.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Back to you, Rashmi.
Thank you, Dr. Nagmani. Minakshi, ma'am, I think that was some wonderful insight that you gave us. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of comments on the chat box. One particular comment that caught my attention was whenever I find myself in a challenging situation in a classroom, I should not panic and I should ask my students for the answer. So shifting my attitude might just help me is what one of the teachers has mentioned, which I think is absolutely right. It is very, very possible that you will learn a lot more and get the answers from the students themselves. That is possible. So I think all of us teachers and even as human beings, we need to be open to such things and, just ask the questions, let them give you the answers. And I think that will definitely take us forward.
I need to add over here, Rashmi, most teachers have a very, I must know it all syndrome. And they get nervous when they are not able to answer. But you start with the premise that we will learn together, then you will not be stressed. Most of the stress is because of intellectual competencies, because they do not know. What if they ask me how many light years the sun and the earth, or what if they ask me 16 multiplied by 4 is how much? I do not know. So that I do not know for teachers, I would suggest is let us learn together. We are going to find out this together. We will explore this together and enjoy the class together. I'm not a person who's supposed to know everything. I'm only facilitating you. I'm going through directions to these different kinds of things. So like what you said, what you said just now, it's challenging. Let the children answer. Yes. Let the teachers also feel comfortable to get that response.
Yeah, so teachers, I think asking questions in exams is not the only thing you need to do. You need to ask questions in your classrooms as well. And it will definitely help you all to stay calmer in the way you manage your classrooms too. So don't take that much of stress. You don't need to. You all are already doing a wonderful job. So share the responsibility of learning with your students and do it together. I think that is what will help all of us move forward. All right, ma'am, thank you so much for this wonderful session. I mean, we have got messages pouring in on what a practical session. Practical is a very commonly used word in the comments that we are receiving today. And I think that is what most teachers are missing, because many speakers speak about a lot of theories, but they do not give practically suggestions that can be implemented practically in their classrooms. And I think that is where you have helped them today. And a lot of teachers have acknowledged that. So thank you so much for being a part of this and for giving all of us this amazing insight and a lot of solutions to move forward and to ensure that we design thinking classrooms going forward. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you, Nagmani. Thank you, CLLE and Teacher Tribe World. It's been wonderful to share my experiences. There's still lots to learn. There's still so much. What I gave you was actually a skeleton of designing thinking classrooms. Thank you so much.
I think, ma'am, the skeleton also will help us a lot. It has definitely laid the foundation, and that will definitely help us. Just some concluding thoughts for all of us to take away. 2 points that will definitely stay with me is create mystery and create magic. That is very important for us. The second thing, if you don't know, learn together. I think that's the most simple yet best solution that we have found today. If you don't know, learn together. So let's follow that and ensure that we have interesting classrooms and interactive and thinking classrooms henceforth, and not get nervous or stressed about how the students are going to learn in case we don't know. Thank you, teachers, for joining us here today. I'm very thankful to all of you for taking time out on a holiday and being with us. For all of you who have not been able to make a note of the email ID for certificates, the email ID is right on your screen. Also, please note, we will take about 15 days from the days of the webinar to send you the certificates. And by then, you should definitely receive your certificates. If there are any queries that you require to clarify from our speakers, be it Minakshi ma'am or Bala sir from our previous session, you can mail those questions to this particular mail ID, and we will ensure that we help you out with your queries. We have many more engagements for you, teachers, and you'll probably receive mails from us on different engagement opportunities that we have. And we are actually very keen on continuing this association with you with different sort of engagements that we have for you going forward. Thank you so much for joining, teachers. Thank you, Minakshi ma'am. We will probably get together soon to discuss way more about designing thinking classrooms. Thank you for joining us, teachers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Teachers, CLLE and teachertribe.org. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am.